Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, Germany is facing a crucial debate over the future of its democracy, as the Bundestag discuss whether to ban the far-right Alternative for Germany AfD party. Supporters of the motion argue that the AfD poses a direct threat to democratic values, while opponents warn that banning the party could backfire, deepening divisions in German society. As the debate unfolds, what are the broader implications for Germany's political landscape and European stability? Joining us today on TVP World to explore these questions is Mattia Nelles, Executive Director of the German-Ukrainian Bureau. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So let's explore this debate from both sides. The supporter of the ban says that the AfD threatens democracy. What are some of the specific concerns that's driving this initiative?
The proponents of the banning the party argue that the party is not just a normal far-right party, it's an extremist party violating fundamental aspects of the German constitution, and far-right peers of the AfD in Europe, Le Pen or Meloni in southern and western Europe, view the AfD with distaste. And particularly, it's about elements of the party which are beyond normal far-right. They're viewed as extremist. The division in Thuringia is viewed as extremist, and as such is followed by or observed by our internal security services. The youth division of the party is viewed as extremist, far-right, Nazi extremist, and as such is being dissolved soon to avoid the party from being banned as such. So that there are people and elements in the party which are way to the right of the political spectrum in Germany that is acceptable to the mainstream political parties, to the society, to the media, and most likely also to the judicial branch.
All right. Now, the opponents of this ban is saying that, well, AfD is gaining electoral support and increasingly popular within the country. Does banning a popular political party risk undermining democracy rather than protecting it?
It certainly could. The AfD is polling well above 20%, and they are wary that opening their flanks to banning makes them vulnerable. So they are trying to cover these flanks, and thus, yes, banning the party would probably make them stronger. So, and the threshold for banning the party, quite frankly, are very high. So a motion in Parliament, which was discussed this Thursday, is not enough. So it's the Constitutional Court which ultimately decides about banning the party. And as of now, the threshold is very high, and it's very unlikely that the AfD will be banned.
Right, and the party has been gaining influence, including even through alliances with the mainstream parties. Some parties like the CDU have collaborated with the AfD, at least at some local level. Does this actually signify the normalization of these, like you mentioned, perhaps more far-right stands within Germany?
That's the biggest fear. And this Friday and this Wednesday, in fact, we saw the beginning of the normalization of the party. We had a motion, not a law, on Wednesday being passed on migration, anti-migration motion, introduced and then passed with the votes of the CDU, AfD, and the Liberals. And then a law brought in on the similar topic, anti-migration law, on Friday, which failed to pass. And that broke a taboo, because so far in German politics, there was really the four centrist parties agreed, including the leader of the CDU, that now no procedural votes, no legislative votes, no votes of substance would be passed with the votes of the AfD. And that taboo was broken this Wednesday and nearly broken again this Friday. So it marks the normalization of the party. And as you're saying, on the local level and on the regional level, there are already steps of normalization where parliaments in which the AfD holds a third of the vote, and thus ignoring the party isn't simply possible. So we see the normalization of the far right, which is very problematic because, as opponents keep maintaining, they are not just a normal party, but also an instrument of the authoritarian far right countries abroad. So they are really trying to undermine German democracy from within.
All right. So, well, with the party getting popularity, like you mentioned, we're looking at a 20%. Is it the categorization of a far-right extremists of being like kind of overturned window is being dragged to that side where the normalization of these stances is going to be a trend going forward? Are we seeing a shift fundamentally in German politics? And what happened there?
So German politics is following a global trend, right? We see a global trend to the right, and in some instances to the far right, where migration or anti-migration stances are hardening, and that's so Germany is just was lagging behind. So in a certain way, Germany here is becoming more and more like the rest of the world, the rest of Europe, and of course the CDU is, and as our main centrist party, knows that, and they're trying to now the hardening anti-migration stance, trying to steal the votes. But the biggest fear that many, including myself, have is that by mimicking or taking some of the positions of the AfD, of the far right, you're just strengthening them. So on the one hand, the AfD is just a normal pattern, follows a normal pattern. On the other hand, our center is also fragmenting, and that is worrisome. That the four centrist parties in Germany alone are weakening and are weaker and weaker every single election cycle. And there comes a time in the future potentially where no German coalition or government could be formed without the tacit agreement or even a coalition with the AfD. That's the biggest fear that we have.
Right, like I mentioned, some parties are now picking up AfD's talking points in order to gain some support when it comes to these elections. But is there, on the other hand, an argument to be made that perhaps these are the topic that the Germans, or at least a subset of Germans, find very passionate about, and the fact that they don't have any party representing these positions outside of the AfD is what has been driving them to a more far-right politics?
It partly is. So the CDU is picking up on that motion. It really knows that the migration topic is it's something that is very concerning to the majority of the Germans, and so it really pushes in that niche. And even the centrist left and center parties have understood that. So the stance on migration overall in the political spectrum has hardened, and that is not due to the AfD, but due to various developments within Germany, terrorist attack in Germany, and migration waves changing the country as such. But I would say that the AfD itself has changed the political spectrum, but they're not, and they shouldn't be normalized, because they stand for everything that Germany tries to not be after the Second World War. They're trying to leave the European Union. They're extremely pro-Putin. They're pro-authoritarian. They're trying to undermine and upend the German political spectrum from within. So on certain topics, the mainstream parties may align with them, but overall they are a big threat to the German democratic model as we know it.
Right. So if the AfD does indeed be banned, even though, like I mentioned, the threshold makes it quite hard to do so, what's stopping them from coming back again with just a different name? Again, we're talking about a party that has been gaining substantial support. And if that does indeed happen, how many times do they have to be banned until it starts to look like the mainstream parties are just banning opposition?
So, as I said, the threshold is very high, and I don't think the Constitutional Court will ultimately ban or allow the ban to move forward. So, banning them and the whole debate might even strengthen them. So, the best way to fight them and to win over them is the ballot box, and for that, the political parties have to make a better argument. And even you can govern a country over 20% of the people. That's okay, as long as the majority holds, and if there are other majorities that are able to form coalition on and agree on certain topics, including migration. So the AfD is here to stay, and it will shape the German political spectrum. But the center must hold, otherwise we're in large problems.
Right. Like I mentioned, the center must hold in order for the country not to be dragged to a more extreme side of things. But when we're looking at the polling numbers of the centrist party, it does seem like the coalition isn't holding as well as many hope to be. What do you think is the fundamental issue there? And do you think that there is any space for course correction?
So again, we're seeing Germany following the political trend. So there's big dissatisfaction with the ruling parties, and the CDU and the Social Democrats, the two largest parties, have been governing the country for the past 60 to 80 years. And then the people are now tired with the status quo. And yes, so the ruling centrist parties have lost a lot of trust by the electorate, and this is where they now have to fight to win that back. And overall, the CDU is well polling at around 30%, so that gives them a strong position to form coalitions with one or other two centrist parties that they choose. So that as of now, I would say the center holds, but the largest danger is that the Conservative Party also fractures and falls in polling closer to AfD levels. And then we see coalitions, multiple coalitions that are possible only with the tacit support of the AfD. And that's the largest danger. So the political parties have to fight for regain the trust of the electorate. And that's an uphill battle because people are dissatisfied with the status quo. They want change, and the slowing down of the German economy and all the other problems make it difficult to regain that trust.
Yeah, it does seem like the ruling coalition is going to be stuck between a rock and a very hard place. But in the meantime, well, like you mentioned, it is very alarming with a rise of more extremist party, and we're looking at 20% of the votes. Even if they cannot govern with just 20%, is it realistic, is it sustainable to completely exclude them from political discussion? Or is there any way to actually turn some of these people around to the more centrist party side of things?
I believe that the most dangerous path is to accept them as a normal player in politics. And on the one hand, they are, but they shouldn't be treated as such. So they bring people to parliament. They propose candidates for speakers or vice speakers of parliaments on the regional level who are clearly extremists with views unacceptable to the political mainstream on especially Germany's past. So I think they will have to be treated as outliers and not given important position in parliaments, not given committee heads position or deputy speakers of the German Bundestag, these things. But that only works if the concerns that the voters have are being addressed. If the mainstream parties continuously fail to address those concerns on migration, on security, on Russia and China and so on, then the parties, the extremist parties, and we not only have the far right, we also have other populist parties. And if the concerns are not addressed, these parties are gaining a minority which is too large to overlook and to overrule in a way. If they are more than 30%, then they can blockade or paralyze the parliament. And then Germany is looking at circumstances which are very dangerous to the operating heart of the democracy.
Right. Do you think there's an international messaging issue when it comes to this AfD as well? We do see mostly on very mainstream media sources, we kind of constantly warn people of the more extremist stance that they are taking, but on an internet sphere, they seem to not be criticized as such, even resulting in very major figures such as Elon Musk standing for the AfD. Do you think there's like a fundamental miscommunication when it comes to messaging, or are people just standing behind the AfD for their own reasons?
We have to accept that a large share of the German and also the European electorate has far-right views, and that's nothing to be condemned. But of course, outside players like Elon Musk and other disinformation actors are supporting far-right narratives and trying to push them to gain a stronger foothold in repetitive elections. So, yes, the mainstream media is not, it's not taking particular stances on that. They are reporting, about what the party is saying and doing. But Elon Musk is actively embracing these disinformation narratives. And in Germany, the mainstream parties are reporting about what the AfD is doing. And I think we don't have a problem with the mainstream media. We have more problem with outside actors trying to hammer down the narratives, and I think that's the largest danger that we have. Elon Musk and Russian money and Russian narratives supporting the AfD and other far-right parties across Europe.
All right, thank you so much for helping us understand this very contentious debate, and really appreciate your input and insight. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.